Now, one of those mass distractions is the bulldozer, because the bulldozer has now come into Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, that remember was the epicenter of the anti-CAA protests in 2019. A demolition drive by the civic authorities today triggered high-voltage politics. The Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress are accusing the BJP of trying to use the bulldozer to score points ahead of the municipal elections later this year. The big question, of course, will this battle be settled on the street or in the courts? Take a look at our top political story.
A new showdown in the national capital. This time, the hulking JCB rumbled through what was once the epicenter of anti-CAA protests.
After a 2.5 hours hula baloo, the only structure that came down was the iron rods that were put over here for the renovation work. Interestingly, this also wasn't a job of the bulldozer, but the locals who agreed to themselves removed these construction work that was put outside this factory outlet. The bulldozer, the moment after that, took a U-turn and left Shaheen Bagh.
Traffic blocked, riot police ringed around. Authorities called it a routine anti-encroachment drive.
बुलडोजर लौटा नहीं है, ना बुलडोजर रुका है. जो लोग आज उन्होंने गलती मानी, जो लोगों ने माना है कि हमसे गलती हुई और हम दोबारा से जो अतिक्रमण बचा है उसको हटाने का काम करेंगे. अगर वो नहीं हटाएंगे तो पूरा रोड साइड जितना अतिक्रमण है या अंदर कॉलोनी में अतिक्रमण है उस सबको हम खाली कराने का काम करेंगे.
But the bulldozer at Shaheen Bagh did build up a major face-off between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP.
मैं 3 दिन पहले आया था, मैंने खुद आह्वान किया लोगों से, लोगों ने इंक्रोचमेंट को हटा लिया. अब ये मुझे बता दें इंक्रोचमेंट है कहाँ? अगर इंक्रोचमेंट है मैं खुद तुड़वा लूंगा, मैंने खुद तुड़वाया है. ये पीडब्ल्यूडी का रोड है. अगर ये गलत करेंगे तो लोग तो आएंगे ना. मुझे मेरे से बात करें एमसीडी के लोग, यहाँ लोकल पुलिस भी है, आए वो.
Shaheen Bagh grabbed international headlines in December 2019 after hundreds of demonstrators, mostly women, occupied one of its bustling streets to protest the Citizenship Amendment Act. 3-month demonstration ended after the pandemic lockdown set in. Local residents in the Muslim-dominated neighborhood allege vendetta behind the bulldozer action.
बुलडोजर ड्राइव है, बुलडोजर ड्राइव पार्टिकुलरली एक कम्युनिटी के खिलाफ भाजपा सरकार दिमाग पे बुलडोजर चलाना चाह रही है. हमारे घरों पे, मस्जिदों पे नहीं बल्कि दिमाग पे.
The drive in the South Delhi neighborhood came in the wake of bulldozers plowing into several structures at Jahangirpuri in northwest Delhi 2 weeks ago, ostensibly as a part of an anti-encroachment measure that followed communal clashes in that area. The political rhetoric remains the same.
जो लोग अतिक्रमण को बचाने के लिए, जो बांग्लादेशी रोहिंग्याओं के अतिक्रमण को बचाने के लिए, आतंक फैलाने वाले लोगों का अतिक्रमण बचाने के लिए जो बुलडोजर के सामने लेटे हैं, जनता भी उनको लेटाने वाली है.
An earth mover or a dog whistle in an increasingly surcharged political climate.
Designed to remove illegal constructions, the bulldozer, however, today has been branded a political tool, leading to a face-off between the Aam Aadmi Party-led Delhi government and the BJP-led municipal corporation. But with no big construction demolished today in Shaheen Bagh, was it a warning against those who may take law and order into their own hand, or was it a sheer political messaging in Delhi? With Himanshu, Pooja Shali for India Today.
Now, from the bulldozer, which seems to have stirred a communal divide on the ground, let's turn to an issue which has, over the years, also stirred a communal divide of sorts: population growth rates. Now, the myth which has been spread by some is that Muslims could overtake Hindus at present population growth rates because, according to this myth, Muslims are procreating much faster. Well, the 5th National Family Health Survey has shown that across all communities, fertility rates are falling, and in fact, Muslim community fertility rates are actually declining even more sharply over the last 2 decades, showing clearly that education is the real factor. In fact, the real significant difference at the moment is no longer Hindu versus Muslims, as is often believed, but North India versus South India. In a moment, we'll tell you more, but first look at this story from Milan Sharma.
The 5th National Family Survey has debunked many population myths. The country's overall fertility rate has dipped to 2, which is lower than the population replacement level of 2.1. Now, only 5 states in India are above the replacement level of 2.1. They are Bihar, Meghalaya, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand and Manipur. Among the religious communities, the Muslim fertility rate saw the sharpest fall, from 4.4 in 1992 to 93 to 2.3 in 2019 to 2021. Yet, the Muslim community fertility rate remains the highest among all. Fertility rate among Hindus dropped to 1.94 from 2.1 in 2015 to 16. The figure in 1992 to 93 was 3.3. The Buddhist and Neo-Buddhist community had the lowest fertility at 1.39. Muslims have also increasingly adopted modern spacing methods of contraception, from 17% in National Family Health Survey 4 to 25.5 in National Family Health Survey 5, which is the third highest after Sikhs 27.3% and Jains 26.3%. With Milan Sharma in New Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's raise the questions and debunk a few myths. Muslim population growth, is it rising or falling as the survey shows? Is the real issue the north-south divide? What are the takeaways from this health survey? Joining me now is Poonam Muthreja from the Population Council, and I'm also joined by Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, author, The Population Myth, Islam, Family Planning and Politics in India. He's also former Chief Election Commissioner. Let's go first to Poonam Muthreja. Let's go first to Dr. Qureshi. Dr. Qureshi, you've been talking about busting the myths. And one of those myths you've been saying is that Muslim populations are no longer rising as sharply as most people believe. They're coming down. When you look at the numbers, they're still higher than Hindus, 1.94 versus 2.3. So which figure do we look at? Do we look at absolute figures, 2.3 versus 1.94, or the fact that over the last 2 decades, Muslim population growth rates have declined even more sharply than any other community?
Yeah, Rajdeep, the second is important. It is true that the Muslim population growth is the highest still. Their family planning is the least still. But having conceded that, the fact that in the last 20 years, they are catching up very fast. Their the rate of growth is declining faster than the Hindus. As a result, the gap between the Hindus and Muslims, which was 1.1% 30 years ago, and NFHS 4 came down to 0.48, and now it has come down to 0.36. So it is coming down, and the reason why the Muslims still have the least family planning is because the socio-economic factors which determine the family planning behavior, namely literacy, particularly of girls, income and service delivery, these are most crucial, and all three Muslims are the most backward. And nobody is talking about their education, nobody is talking of their poverty. On the contrary, every other day we get a video where congregations are being asked to boycott the Muslims economically, so they will become poorer, and then they will produce children, then you won't like it.
The survey, Dr. Qureshi, clearly shows that if I look at 20 years, a 30-year span from 1991, when growth rates among fertility rates were 4.4% to today 2.3, that's a huge decline. So clearly something has happened in the last 30 years, as it has happened across communities. What, according to you, has happened? Because the propaganda is that Muslims are continuing to have more than 3 children, 4 children, 5 children. This survey says 2.34. They could even reach, at this rate, replacement levels 10 years from now at 2.1.
Yeah, you know, the propaganda has been, and the impression created very widely is that the gap between Hindus and Muslims is 8, 9, 10 children. whereas NFHS 5 surveys tell us that the gap was never more than 1.1 children, 1.1 only. And that also has come down to half the child, and now 1/3, 0.36. The fact, because Muslims are catching up on family planning faster despite their illiteracy, despite their poverty, and despite the fact that services they do not reach those so-called Muslim pocket, which they call derisively as mini Pakistan. They don't go there. So despite that, Muslims are catching up very fast, which is a very good thing. Very good sign. And importantly,
driven by what? Driven by what? Dr. Qureshi, in your view, what explains that?
Yeah, because 20-25 years ago, India realized that development is the best contraceptive, and the focus on education and literacy overall for the whole country. The fact that country is developing, which is why family planning is happening, and all through persuasion, mind you, no danda. No, the compulsory family planning has happened in 75, 77, from the backlash of which we have not recovered till today. In fact, interestingly, I did a study. I was the chairman of a committee. We wanted to study the politicians' attitude towards family planning. And we found they are not bothered. They are scared of talking of family planning. And we examined 4 Lok Sabhas, 13, 14, 15, 16, 20 years. Out of lakhs of questions, parliamentary questions, only 0.15% were questions on family planning.
Let me just take Dr. Qureshi, I just want to
such a success. Yeah.
I just want to stop you for a moment because Dr. Poonam Muthreja is joining me and her video was going in and out. Dr. Muthreja, what is your biggest takeaway from this survey? Because the focus in this country has always been, at least politically, on the religious divide. But what I see from the survey is the real story is the North-South divide. South India reaching replacement levels, and it's the North Indian states which remain backward. So instead of Hindu-Muslim, as our politicians seem to focus on, should we really be focusing on North versus South?
Absolutely, North versus South. In fact, the Muslim population in Tamil Nadu has much lower fertility rates than the Hindu population in Bihar. So that's a stark example of what you're saying. And we should, in fact, there are 5 states in the north that we need to focus on. And we need to focus on the indicators which Qureshi Saab also mentioned: education, services, better health governance, and creating jobs and livelihoods for people who do not have access to family planning, are the lowest quintile. They are the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe women, the Muslims, and so on. And second, we need to give more choice. As Indonesia and Bangladesh have done, where the Muslim population has seen big fertility decline. North is an area where it is the indicators that dictate whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim, where fertility is declining slowly, but it is declining, and amongst the Muslim population of North India too, not only South India.
Let me just reiterate, Dr. Muthreja, something you said for our viewers. You are telling me that Muslim fertility rates in Tamil Nadu are declining more sharply than Hindu fertility rates in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar.
Absolutely.
So the real crisis still lies within the Bimaru states, mainly Bihar, UP, also Jharkhand, much more than they do in terms of Hindu Muslims. Am I correct? So there's a direct linkage between access to education, women's education, and fertility rates, rather than religion.
As well as access to
health services.
You know, religion has very little to do today with fertility rates. So the South, Kerala, Lakshadweep, look at Tamil Nadu. In fact, you know, the TFR for Hindus is 2.29 in UP, and for Muslims, it's less than 2 in Tamil Nadu.
You know, I have some figures which says that at present growth rate, because the propaganda was that at present growth rates, Muslims would overwhelm Hindus. Well, if these rates remain, in 2070, there would be 277 Muslim share of population would be about, 0.21 sorry, let me get that right. Growth rate, at present growth rates, Hindu population in 2070 would be 277 crores Hindus and 58 crores Muslims. So you would still have virtually the same ratio as it is today.
Absolutely, and they can never overtake the Hindu population. And secondly, in the last 2 decades, Rajdeep, the Muslim population has declined faster than the Hindu population across the country.
But it's still higher than Hindu population. So there are those who will turn around and say, look, it's still 2.3 versus 1.94.
Yeah.
So, but it will equalize. But invest in their education. You know, education levels have increased amongst Muslims. And to quote from Qureshi Saab's book, there is a growing middle class which recognizes that they want to have fewer children. And by the way, the unwanted fertility of Muslims is close to 11%, while for Hindus it's 9%, which means that 2% we can decrease further as the women do want to have fewer children. The Muslim wanted fertility rate is much lower than the fertility rate.
Right.
So we can invest more. They use temporary methods more, and India has focused primarily on sterilization. So if you, in fact, it is an opportunity to provide Muslim women temporary methods. India has much fewer methods than Indonesia, Bangladesh, and all our neighbors. So instead of, playing politics on this, we need to invest in family planning, but also education. And
bottom line, the real correlation is between health and education. The more access you provide to health services, education, the better. I'll give you 30 seconds, Dr. Qureshi, very quickly.
Yeah, two quick points. You know, I got a mathematical model prepared by Professor Dinesh Singh and Professor Ajay Kumar to know how soon Muslims will overtake the Hindus. And the model says not for 1,000 years. And one fact which is very important, that in 1951, the gap between Hindus and Muslims was 27 crores more Hindus. Now there are 80 crore more Hindus and growing, because 42% of the Hindus are not practicing family planning. Imagine 42% of 80% population not practicing family planning. They are not far behind in the lack of family planning.
Can I give one more statistic? And that is that it is 36% Muslims, Hindus believe it is the responsibility of women to do family planning, and compared to that, it is 32% Muslims. So more Muslim men believe it is not a woman's responsibility only.
Okay. Let's leave it there. These are fascinating facts that have come from this National Family Health Survey. We need much more data like this to bust the myths. It's time to bust myths in this country. That's one way, in a way, to reduce the friction that exists between communities. Dr. Qureshi Poonam Muthreja, thank you very much for joining me here on the News Today.